Hello and welcome to BusyWorksBeats.com. I need you guys to smash that like button. I'm about to show you how to mix crazy tracks using nothing but FL Studio stock plugins, so you don't have to buy any new plugins. Let's hop straight into FL. Here's the reference track for today. So here's the original mix. This is an Alchemist type track. All right, so there's a part of the song where we have this nice echo that hear that like little tickle in the right ear. And that's centered. All right, so there's a lot we got to do here. So first thing first, we are going to change up the mastering chain. And so the mastering chain I just reset. But let's go check channel by channel, track by track. So here we have the Roland EP34, or maybe it's not Roland, but they call it the EP34. I keep mixing up. Anyhow, EP34 tape echo. So in the track, what it's doing is creating this infinite texture. All right, did we muted every track? My fault, y'all. All right, so here's. So here's the texture that we're adding. So we can't get the same exact vibe, but I can show you guys how to get close. All right, so let's not use that one. Let's use Fruity Delay 3, and we need to automate it the same exact way we did. Go to your mixer, right click, create an automation clip, which I've already done here. You can turn this down to 0 in the beginning and right click to add what are called nodes to the automation. So basically we're turning the automation on and off. That's what we're doing here. So I'm basically just saying, here's where I want this effect on only during this part of the song. So let's go to this part of the song. Let's find the loop, hit control to loop the bar up top. And now I need to turn this channel on wherever it is. So we need to use Fruity Delay 3. Now the thing about the EP34 is it's not synced to the tempo. So it's at 281 milliseconds here. So we need to turn the Fruity Delay off sync mode. So turn off tempo sync. And in the top left of the info panel, you could read the values. So in this case, we're just going to copy that same value, 281, somewhere around there. So let's do 280.8 milliseconds. So we have a similar sound, okay, but we need a longer feedback so that it keeps going. And also too, I want the feedback level to be down just a little bit more. Now also too, I want to check the tape echo to see if we have a blend knob, because we have the echo repeats. This is the feedback level, somewhere around like 40% on this one. And then echo volume is at 50% and the recording volume is low, which means the dry level in Fruity Delay 3 is very low, which makes this mostly delay. So we are at 50% delay and about 10% recording level. So that's going to be our dry level here. Let's keep that at 10%. Let's keep the wet level somewhere around 50-ish percent. And then the echoes, the feedback on that is set to about 40. So again, it's not going to perfectly equate to FL, but let's hear what it sounds like so far. Similar, but it doesn't last long enough. So let's turn up the feedback. Okay, so the feedback going up just makes it ping more. So let's turn up the wet level here to just turn up the volume of the effect. So we're close, getting close. So let's turn up the wet level. I think it needs a little more smeariness. So let's add a little time modulation. This is pitch modulation here. That adds a little smear to the sound. Let's mess with some of these diffusion settings here. This is going to add a little more chorusing. So we're still kind of missing out on level, just the volume. So I'm just going to manually turn this up through a fader or just turning these equivalently up. So instead of doing all that, we're just going to add an EQ. Let's turn the levels up. Okay, so let's hear the before. See how it has a longer saturated tail? So we need to map that longer saturated tail. See how it just kind of fades? So we need the delay time. It just seems like it needs to have a longer feedback tail. But again, there's a point where the feedback becomes a little too ringy. So let's just use some of this cutoff to get rid of the high frequencies of the ping. So now we can turn up the feedback without getting too much. Now, before we just slap more feedback, we could also use the saturation knob here. And now we have that vintage depth that we got in the EP34. So this is a lot closer, so we can turn off the EQ. All right, so that the after here's before. So if you want to learn how to mix, I have a course called Mixing Fundamentals. It's basically teaching you the fundamentals from compression, saturation, delay, reverb, making your stuff loud, etc., clipping. Go to busyworksbeats.com/premium. You guys can sign up for free and look for the Mixing Fundamentals course, or just go to busyworksbeats.com and look for the Mixing Fundamentals course if you want to buy it straight out. But that will go through how to learn what I just did. Basically mimicking, this, I bought it at like, it's valued at 300 or something. Okay, and I just showed you how to do that for free. So let's do it before and after. Here's before. So we still have that ding, 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 ding. Okay, so we need to, that's the last little detail here. Let's open up Fruity Delay 3. So we don't have that ding, ding, ding. So that means I need to open up the cutoff because I cut off too much high frequency, most likely. So that's some more resonance in here so we can get some tone. So that little ringy, that ding, 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 it's hard to get that. Let's see if I move this down. There we go. So we're going to use the resonance to create that tone. This is the hard part, is figuring out the exact frequency because we have to wait for this to trigger. So let's. There we go. So somewhere around 1200 hertz. Now you hear that tone. So that's what we're adding. And let's also try ping pong mode just to see if we get more width here. Now, I don't think the first one had ping pong, but let's just hear. Okay, I can't tell if it's stereo or mono. I could check, but let's just switch this to mono mode. And now we have that retro feel because now it's mono. All right, so you guys can do that with stock plugins, but it requires the knowledge to get you there. Okay, so that's why I teach this stuff. Next, let's focus on the drum channel here. Now this drum channel uses what are called NAM profiles through a plugin called Genome to get that punch. And then we're running into a tape machine to chop off the highs and add a little bit of pitch modulation and saturation. And then we're moving into a frequency splitter, which I'll keep on this channel to separate the snare out to a separate channel, which is 8. I think, let me make sure this is routed. All right, so this should be routing. I don't know why this is, oh, I turned it off, duh, that's why. Okay, here we go. Okay, so on this channel, I'm using that same delay to create a smacky effect with the snare. It's more of a ping pong delay. For now, we're just going to turn it off. This is distracting. Okay, so the drums sound big because of Genome. As you can hear without it, it's very thin sounding. All right, so to recreate this now, it's not recreatable technically because of how Genome is created, but we're not going to get into Genome. It's not about Genome, it's about the NAM profiles. We just use Genome to load them. Without boring y'all to tears, let's open up Fruity Limiter, because what we need to do is create density to our drums. Now, most people think I'm about to limit the drums. We're actually just going to turn the ceiling up, so that's not what we're going to do. We're going to use the saturation knob here. But we need to drive the gain into this plugin. And then we're going to pull back the saturation knob to the left. I'm going to exaggerate it so I could hear. So now we need something that helps us control the level, because right now the level is just louder. But we have to drive the input in order for that saturation to work. So you're not going to hear the saturation unless you drive that gain enough. So now we're going to use an EQ tool. On the far left, Lifestyle did it, show me this knob. This fader, I never noticed it was here. On the left side, this is the main level. So we can pull this back down. So let's do it before and after. And let's get the levels here. So we're at, what is this? -19. And now we're at -9. So we can pull 10 dB down if we wanted to perfectly gain match. All right, so here's before. I'm just gonna turn it up just for the sake of it's too quiet. So here's before. Here's after. Has much more density to it because of the saturator. So this saturator is pretty aggressive though. So you guys want to just try different levels of it. But it sounds pretty good on these drums. So other ways to achieve the sound without that specific plugin is Maximus. It does have some saturation on it. The only thing is when I turn Maximus on, it does something to the sound that kind of makes it sound filtered. So that's why I don't mess with Maximus. So I have to turn each section off before I start messing with anything. Or excuse me, compressor off. And then I'll go to the master channel here. And there's a saturator right here. There's two different styles. You have mode A and mode B. But again, you have to drive the signal going into Maximus. So here's what we're gonna use what's called the pre-gain, the preamp, to boost the volume going in. And here's where it gets convoluted because it's saturating the sound that I didn't. So this is why Maximus, I never really got into it. Let's just use this EQ to control the level here. Now let's start messing with these thresholds here. So this is going to give you a different style of saturation. So threshold is just the style, basically, and the ceiling is how much saturation you're adding. Like how much of the top of the audio are you chopping off, basically. Okay, so to get more sound, let's just boost the input. So again, the higher the ceiling, the less feeling of saturation you get. The lower the ceiling, the more crunchy it's gonna feel. So we want somewhere in the middle. So the light part is the finalized audio. So I'm basically just taking out these heavy peaks. So this is mode A. Let's try mode B. Mode B seems a little more boomier, has more clarity in the lows, whereas mode A is more smeary, if I had to compare those. So let's do mode B. It has more girth to it. Let's add some post gain to turn this back up. So now we get a big sound out of the drums. So again, here is before. Here's before, technically. Here's after. So it's pretty aggressive how I pushed it pretty heavy. But you can always pull it back based on the input level from the EQ here. So if you want less, just pull it back. And then compensate with the outpost level here. So we found a sweet spot for the drums. So now the drums are controlled. Let's move to the next channel here. So we have RC20, and I usually only use this for the wobble. So I'll show you guys how to create the wobble effect in Fruity Delay 3. Let's go to Fruity Delay 3, turn the dry level down, turn feedback level down, turn delay time all the way down, take it off of tempo sync. Not mandatory, but I'm doing that anyway. And we're gonna add what's called time modulation here. So this creates a vibrato effect, essentially. So I'm not sure what sound this is even on. Okay, the Celeste bell. Let's turn the effects on. So here's what it sounds like with RC20. I'm gonna turn it up just so you guys can hear it. All right, so it's like, dun, dun, you know, it's like voice is shaky. But I'll show you guys how to do it in Fruity Delay 3. Basically, again, turn your wet level all the way up, dry level all the way down, feedback all the way down, delay time all the way down. And now everything else becomes in effect. We could add the time modulation. We're going to turn this up because we wanted to control the pitch at a strong amount. I'll exaggerate so you guys can hear. So it's like that. But we need it to go faster, so let's turn up the rate of the modulation. Somewhere around 4 hertz. Let's just pull back the depth, which is the time knob here. And now we have a very similar. So that's our version. Here's the RC20. So theirs has less depth and more speed. So let's do a little bit faster. All right, so I just pulled it back. Now that Celeste bell can wobble. Let's see what else we have in this mix. We have Guitar Rig 7. Now this one, there's no way I know how to emulate a wah guitar without getting too far into mixing and sound design. So there is no fast way to do the wah effect inside of FL. You have to basically set up a filter and you have to automate it. And I have to sit here and record automations. It's too many steps to get the result. So in this case, there is no alternative, I'll say. That's workflow safe. For that reason, we're going to use Guitar Rig 7. So that's one of... There's no equivalent for this. Unless there was a way for me to use this channel some type of way. Let me see if this is possible. This may or may not be possible. So we need to go into the events, I guess it's called. I've never dug this deep, but basically we need to take the graph of the mod event and somehow map that to our version of it. That's why I said it gets so convoluted the way you would have to do it. For the sake of this video, we're going to say that you just need to buy the wah guitar plugin. Okay. Next up, we have the snare. So this snare has like a type of delay on it. So let's add Fruity Delay 3. Let's keep the wet level high so we can hear it. And let's turn off tempo sync. So we have that type of sound. Let's turn the delay back. Let's add some ping pong. Widen it out a little bit. And pull back the delay time. Okay, so now we just pull back the wet level. Now if it's too bright, you could use a low pass filter to cut off the highs. We could also add some saturation. So let me solo so so let's count how many feedbacks we have. So it's about 9 feedbacks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, something like that. So ours is like and then it ends. So let's add some more feedback. There we go. Let's add a little more low pass. So now it's like a knocky sound. We could add resonance for tone. Now we just pull back the wet level. So you could do a lot with Fruity Delay 3. It's just most people don't know about it. All right, what's the next channel here? So next up we have a reverb channel. So this is Valhalla Vintage Verb set to a plate reverb. Now in FL Studio, there's no easy way to do this. There's Lux Verb, but let me see what they have here. So they have some plate settings. Let's see if we can get close with one of these. Now we want this channel to be 100% wet level, no dry level. So let's turn the dry level down. Keep the wet level at 0, meaning it's only reverb. Now it's hard to hear because everything. So I'll turn it up just so you guys can hear the reverb. So that's the sound that we're adding, the texture. Let's compare that with Valhalla. Let's turn up the, I don't think there's an EQ for this, so I have to manually turn this up. So theirs is very bright. It looks like they cut out the frequencies from around 200 and below, and then 5K and above. So we need to mimic that with our, so theirs is very like bandpassed. This one's not bandpassed, it's very big. So in this case, let's use a high pass filter here to shape this tone. Let's cut out everything below 200 and everything above 5K. Let's just turn it down a little bit. So now, it sounds similar. So here's the Valhalla. So Valhalla's just seems a little more leveled, less bright focused. All right, so that's the Valhalla. Let's go to Lux Verb. Sounds similar, but let's just EQ out maybe some. Gotta pinpoint the frequency here. Let's just take out some of that 1800s, tame that down. So now it's similar. Let's put that back on its level. Let's see what else we got in this mix. We got some scratches. We got some whatever this is. And then we have a bass going through an compressor. This is basically like a distressor. It just compresses very heavily. So we're pulling out 6 dB, very fast attack. And we have some gain on it. I don't think we have any EQ boost. So basically it's just a fast compressor. So let's pull up the Fruity limiter so that we can visualize the compression here. So instead of using Fruity compressor, which could have some nice sounds, we're using the limiter because I want to visually show you guys what we're doing to the sound. So let's pull down the threshold. Let's turn the ratio to, in the top left, you read the value here. Let's turn it to about 4:1. We want a fast attack, which is down to fast, and the release is set to about 50 milliseconds on here. So let's do the same settings here in FL. So by default, it's set to 200. Let's pull this back to 50 milliseconds. Again, you can read the values in the top left panel. Let's just mess with the threshold here. And then we want more of a squash sound. So in this case, we could pull the gain up, or we could simply pull the threshold down. So let's mess with the gain knob here. Now, I don't know if this is post gain or on the compressor. I don't know if this is post. I assume it's post gain. So I still want more of a squash sound. So let's pull that threshold lower. pretty similar sound here. So here is the compressor. Very powdery. Let's hear the fruity limiter. This one's a little more buzzy. Let's see if we can pull that threshold lower. So now we have a very similar sound here. Very creamy compressor. Just taming those bass notes. The levels are a little loud though, so let's turn that gain down. All right, so let's do the compressor again. All right, so pretty straightforward. Here's the fruity limiter. Let's change out the compressor curve. I just want to see how it reacts to the audio. I feel like this curve sounds better. That feels more like that compressor. All right, so pretty similar sound there. And what else do we have in this channel, this track? I think that's it. Now we just got to mix the entire track. So I'm trying to see here. Do we have reverb set up? What is this? Expand channel. So normally I'll mix into a mix bus, but because my vocals are going directly to the output, I'm trying to avoid mixing my own vocals in here because it gets loud. But it doesn't matter, I guess. So yes, it doesn't matter. All right, so let me see which things. Okay, so we have Trillion getting processed through the RC20 channel for the RC20 effect on channel 5. So I need to make sure I remember this. So because FL resets everything. So 12 goes to 5 basically, and we have a reverb setup. So the 8 goes to channel 9, and 3 is sidechain to 8. This will make sense in a little bit. Okay, so once you group all this stuff, it reroutes everything. So let's go to beat mix. We need to send all of these sounds to the beat mix channel. Maybe we could do this all in one. Maybe I have a new way. Let's click the up arrow here and left click the master channel. See how it doesn't do it for everything. But let's just do it manually. So I'm just going to pause this video. Basically, I'm sending everything to the beat mix and not the master channel. So that way we keep all the routing the same without having to reroute everything. So I'm just taking it off the master, putting it onto the beat mix. So I'm going to pause this video. So everything should be routed to the beat mix channel. I feel like we're missing some sounds here. Yeah, something's definitely not routed right. Let me see something here. Okay, it was the side chain I had to change. So here's the mix that we have so far. So at this point, I'm just gonna level, turn the bass, the sounds down. I usually turn everything down first, and I level into the beat mix by adding an EQ. I usually pull it up 9 dB. And what I'll do is I'll turn every channel down. So now I can readjust the priority of the sounds. Like this sound is way too loud. Now I'm just gonna level here. AKA turn the faders up and down. So what I'm gonna do is put the wobble effect directly on the bass so I don't have to route it over to this other channel, because what I wanna do is send these sounds through the reverb and I don't want my bass going through the reverb. So I basically just rerouted some stuff. So now I can turn the bass up. So the piano's already mixed. We don't need to do anything to it. These sounds are from the Helios pack too, by the way. So go to busyworksbeats.com/Helios, this piano. So that's from the Helios pack. That piano is very dense sounding. So I'm actually surprised how far we've gotten, especially with stock plugins on acoustic instruments, which usually take a lot more work. Okay, so on the master channel, I'll usually clip first. I'll run it into a stereo imager, and then I'll run it into compression and sometimes EQ. This time I don't think we need EQ. And then some limiting. So let's start with the clipper here. Let's add Fruity Soft Clipper. I usually pull threshold to the left just to see what kind of tone I get. It's more for trap though. So let's A/B. So let's try both. So soft clipping is all the way to the left, hard clipping's to the right. Let's try, this is soft clipper 2. Let me name these so I can know what's what. Soft clipper 2. So now let's try it on the right side. And again, you can only hear soft clipping when you boost the volume going into it hard enough. So we're going to use the EQ knob here to push into the soft clipper and then turn the output. So I like the tone here. It's almost doing like a form of compression. Only thing is, I like the tone, but it gets a little heavy. Squarish. So let's just, what I'm going to do here to solve this is I'm going to push the post level until it's at like 0, which we still have 3 dB to go, which is super aggressive. So let's pull this back that amount. So now we're at like -3. So here's before the mix bus. We're sitting at what, -12? Here's after. And now we're at what, -3? So technically if we want to A/B, let's pull this down. All right, so here's technically before. Just listen for the emptiness, the energy of it. All right, so it feels very void. Here's after. All right, now here's where I usually add stereo imaging. Now, FL has a new plugin called like Spreader or something like this. Let me see if it even sounds good on this. So I never liked this plugin. Let me see something here. Let's try. So what's the difference between separation and spread? So it's not clear the difference between spread and separation here. So it definitely adds like a delay from left to right, but I don't necessarily want that type of sound. So it's not very clear like what is spread versus separation, and it's definitely messing up my phase. So let's do this. Let's not widen anything below 200 Hertz. just to see what kind of sound we get. I just think it just doesn't do what I need it to do. For that reason, I don't like the stereo plugins inside of FL, and it's unfortunate because here's what. Never mind, I'm not even gonna compare. But here's what I would normally do: the SSL, widen it out like this, and there's no plugin in FL that could just do that easily. There's another plugin called Fruity Stereo Shaper, but this is very convoluted. Like, it's very convoluted, so we're gonna just have to take the L on the stereo separation part. So far we have density, now we need our compressor. So let's go to Fruity Compressor because this has different modes on it. Now this is not a visual compressor, so you have to, if you can't hear compression, you gotta push the effect to the extreme and then pull it back with the threshold knob. So here we're gonna set it to 30 milliseconds. 200 milliseconds is fine on the release. I usually have it at 100, but let's just have it at 200 for now. Let's do 2.5 to 1, and let's lower the threshold until we hear the volume dissipate, and then slowly pull it back. Now different modes give you different saturations. So vintage gives you more harmonics from what I remember, meaning that we're adding frequencies to the track. Now this compressor is very hard to hear. So the best thing you could do is just A/B it, turn it on and off, see if it sounds better or worse. And does it add any more groove or less groove? I think it holds the bass. It definitely pulls the bass out of the mix because it's adding saturation. And lastly, I usually go to a maximizer at this point. So let's add a Fruity Wave Shaper for the final kind of saturation touch. Let's do 4x oversampling. Mess with the curvature here. So this is saturating the sound. Let's push the pre until it gets too aggressive. And then we can pull the mix level back. So we still have room for a limiter, so let's add that fruity limiter. Now here we can mess with the tape saturation, but we've already saturated enough. Let's just push the gain into the limiter. You know what I forgot to do on the drums? We pushed the drums with the saturator, but I forgot to chisel out the high end on the drums to mimic the tape machine. So let's go back to the drums. They're a little too bright. All we need to do is just use a high shelf here and just shave off some of the highs. Just a little bit like that. Also, we downsampled the drums through the Ampex. I think we're on downsample mode if I remember correctly. Where is that even at? Oh, here it is under the mode. Yeah, downsampled. So what I need to do to create some texture here is we're going to add the EQ for the tone, but then we're going to add Fruity Delay 3 once more, the GOAT. And we're going to saturate it using a little saturation, not too much because we already have the tone we want, but we're going to go to where it says sample rate here. And you have to read the values in the top left. We're downsampling. What I forgot to do is turn the wet level up, turn the dry level down, feedback level down, delay time all the way down. So now everything else becomes in effect. So I'm going to audibly let you guys hear what downsampling sounds like. Hear that ringy noise. So we don't want that ring noise though. So you gotta. So again, the trick in getting rid of that ring is to add a low pass filter for this specific plugin. So again, I'll exaggerate. Hear that crunch. Now Bits adds noise. So it's more of like a noisy distortion, where a sample rate adds this ringy noise, ringy frequency. And then again, to get rid of the top end, if you don't like that ring, is that a little bit of a low pass filter. And this is what we basically did with the EQ anyhow, so we don't need to overly do it. See, without the EQ, here's with the EQ, just tames it just a little bit. I will say this mix is a little pushed. I pushed it pretty heavy. I pushed this mix pretty heavily on the mix bus, so we can pull back some of the limiting and compression here. So this limiter is very, like, once you hit the limiter too hard, you could just hear it. That's why I don't usually use it, but it does sound pretty good. It's just once you hit the limiter in a certain way, it's hard to smatter it, if that makes sense. So you got to do all the like pre-stages to get the levels even. That's why I have so many stages of clipping and compression before the limiter. So it's hard to tell how much dB we're taking out. This line looks like it's at about -3, so this goes to about... So it's just hard to tell how much dB we're taking out of the signal. Again, if you want that final stage of saturation, which I would not use on this track, it's already overly saturated, you'd pull the saturation knob to the left. I think it's just too crunchy. So. Let's do one more thing. Let's add a fruity limiter here, but we're not going to use it as a limiter. We're going to use it as an expander. This is a very risky move here, especially just before a limiter. So the first limiter, we need to make sure that ceiling is actually 0. So this is expander. Okay, so we're going to make sure that is actually 0, so that anything that goes above 0, it pulls it down in volume. To preserve some headroom, let's pull back the gain there. So we can use the expander to gain. So now I'm in the expander here, and we need to go to compressor mode from what I remember here, and the ratio can go to the left, which is expansion. Most people go to the right, which is compression, meaning it pulls the volume down when it goes over a certain point. But now we're going to set it to where if it goes over a certain threshold, this blue horizontal line, we're going to boost it up at a certain ratio here. So we only want to catch like the pointy parts of the audio. So the first thing is set the threshold so that it captures most of the pointy parts of the audio. We don't want the body of the audio. So as you can see, the horizontal line, let me make this bigger, hold on. See how big we can make this screen. All right, so as you guys can see, most of the vertical lines that go above that horizontal blue line, it's just only transient information. We don't want to capture the body of the audio in this case. Now let's do negative ratio, or lower than 1:1. Now we're boosting the volume of those transients. Now we got to be careful. So here's where we need both screens up, because I need to monitor how much dB we're taking out, if any, on the limiter here. So I'll exaggerate this. Let's see what kind of sound we can get. Also, I want a very fast release time. I don't want this long 200 millisecond release. I want a fast attack, fast release, because transients don't last very long. They only last about 20 milliseconds half the time, at the most. I'm adding pointy information back to this track. Now we can lower the threshold, see how much. All right, so let's do this before and after. Here's before the expander. Here's after. All right, so saying I'm adding almost 2 dB, 2.5 dB of transient information here. Now, if we want a bigger transient, we can make these longer, but the drums are very fast here. Let's see how low we can go with the threshold before we get too. See, that's where it starts messing up. That's your upward compression here. All right, so there we have pretty much everything we need. And now you guys could probably mess with that saturator on the master a little bit more. I think it's still a little too aggressive. So let's see if we like the expander for this channel, this track or not. So it's so subtle, but the expander adds like this push-pull thing. It's such a subtle thing. It just exaggerates that like push, pull, push, pull. So it's a subtle detail, but that's what most people don't have in their beats is dynamic. So I still think it's still crunchy. I would go back and really tame some of the channels here. So I think the crunch is coming from this fruity wave shaper. So that's where most of the crunch is coming from. So let's pull back on the mix level here. So I took some of the saturation off the drums. It was a little too heavy. Just want to see what happens if we saturate the bass a little bit. I like that tone. This just sounds cool. So the only thing here's where it gets really convoluted, because we have to use what's called patcher in order to address the mid and side information. So I like this mix. I think the sides are a little too aggressive, so I'm going to put patcher first. Now you're not going to hear any audio if you just hit play. Don't try to memorize this, but I'll give you guys the project files for free on this mix. Just go to busyworksbeats.com/FL Studio. Let's right click. Let's add a plugin. We want to add the Fruity Stereo Shaper, and we want to double click in here. Right click the presets, go to mixing, and then do mid. I always mix these up. Mid A side splitter. We need to right click, create an output, audio output send number 2. That's what this number stands for. This 2 right here represents the send output for the stereo information. So by default, this is set to mono. So we're hearing only a mono signal. So let's right click, let's insert a plugin here. Let's add an EQ to the mono. We're not going to do anything to the mono. I just want to add an EQ just to have it. So this is the mono. Let's rename this mono. And then we're going to right click here, insert a plugin, and I want an EQ on the stereo. So this is the side information. I should rename this. Actually, this is not. Let's use the term mid. All right, so that's mid, and here's the side information. And what we want to do is, by default, you can't see the side information. So if I right click, I can mute the mid signal. So now we're hearing the side information, but if you double click in here in the parametric EQ2, you won't see anything. That's because you need to turn on the, you need to change the monitoring. So let's click here on the drop down, and let's go to, I always forget the label for it, so forgive me, y'all. It's been a minute. But we need to switch this monitor input to the side input. So now you can see all the side information, or else you won't be able to see this. So now this is the side information, and I can go, okay, what do we need to clean up about the side information? I think the piano's a little heavy, around 300 hertz. This is too much energy on that piano. We could copy this over to the piano and just address the piano, which is probably the best scenario. Let's copy this over to the piano. So on the piano, basically, I'm just chiseling out let's turn it just had too much 300 hertz in it. So now I don't have to affect the entire beat in order to address that one thing. Okay, so that's why I would target that specific thing and not the entire master, because you don't want to pull out energy at 300, because that's pretty much where everything lives in the track. So let's do it before and after. Here's before the adjustment. Really heavy on the sides. And here's after. It's a little bit more lightweight. Okay, so now we don't have as much in the microphone. Okay, so sorry to blow your ears out. So we don't need to cut out the bass on the sides. That's part of the width. And nextly, let's right click to unlock the mid signal. And now what I like to do is just like listen to both the mid side soloed. So what you do is you right click this. So here's the mid signal. And I have to ask, what can I pull back on? Really, the bass can be pulled back a little bit in volume. So I'm going to take off that saturation, even though I liked it. It makes the bass a little more smooth and round. So I like everything about the middle signal. Let's try the sides again. So I might get rid of the lows just to see. This will make them sound more centered. Because side is the difference between your left and your right ear. That's what it actually is. Time difference, pitch difference. Whereas mid signal is when your left ear hears the same exact thing as your right ear. So now I'm taking out the bass on the sides to see. So it gives a little more definition, because everything just feels kind of smeary. And now the bass feels centered and more shapely. we got rid of a little too much, so let's pull it back up. Here's an exaggerated low end on the sides. Not a bad sound. It just depends on how you guys want to shape your stereo field. In this case, I want to keep the bass more mono. We could do the same exact thing for the highs on the sides. I don't think we need to adjust anything. Now we'll mess with your stereo signal because now we're changing out the frequency content. So let's only pull it down about I feel like even that 1 dB changes the stereo image so much. So we're gonna take off patcher because we don't need it for the master. We only needed it on our piano. So again, here's before the mix bus. This is what it sounded like before we mixed it. Here's after. Chiseling out some of the highs on the drums from that sample reduction. I feel like now we're missing that piano density, so this is why sometimes you're under your decisions. I feel like that piano needed the width. Doesn't sound as dense. Let's open up the drums a little bit. So the only thing really missing is that stereo effect, but let me just add it in just to show you guys what the final touch that I would add. This is the final touch that I would normally add, but that's not an FL plugin. So that's the only thing that's missing really. Let's see if we can widen out the track using the channel. I don't usually use this knob here, but to widen out your channel, you can click this button where it says view extra volume and stereo properties and find this knob down here. You have to make your mixer big enough because if you make it small, that will disappear. So to make it bigger, and then you could try to widen it this way, but there's like zero control over at the width. And it sounds like it's hollowing the sound out. So for the demo purposes, I'm going to turn on, actually never mind, let's just leave it. All right, so let's let this rock for a little bit. All right, that's why it sounded weird. The piano was only on the side. Okay, I was wondering why it sounded like it was missing something. My bad, let's run this back. shaving off a little bit of the subs on the drums. So there's still a couple touch-ups I would do, like mess with the piano, compress it a little bit more on the sides or the mids in certain areas. But for the most part, that is how you mix your beats using nothing but stock FL Studio plugins. If you want to learn more about FL Studio, go to busyworksbeats.com/FL Studio. Share this video with a friend. Peace out, guys.